Have you ever had a goal or dream that you were so sure was it? Something you felt you could spend your whole life chasing and be happy. That made you feel like you could finally have some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose. You feel motivated by it and spend days researching and planning out exactly what you'll do. You come up with a schedule, figure out the habits you can start working on, and think out every possible contingency. You're serious about this, you want to make it work, and so you keep on planning and planning and planning. Then a couple days pass, and then a couple weeks. You plan less and less. Finally, months and maybe even years pass, and then you start to wonder, whatever happened to it all? I get it, because I've lived a life of regret. I've gone through that exact same process more times than I can count. When you live your life always planning but then never actually taking action on that plan, you trick yourself into feeling like you've done something. You trick yourself into feeling like you're making progress because you're visualizing your goal. You're visualizing the things that you'd have to do to get to that goal and getting all the dopamine that results from that without actually having to follow through with any of it. You've put the responsibility of that follow through to your future self, who will just wake up one day with this feeling of emptiness and wonder whatever happened to all those plans, to all that wasted potential. The reality is that planning isn't progress. It's procrastination. It's distraction. It's so easy to fall into without realizing, I know, but I don't want you to go through the same thing that I went through. So here's how you can break that pattern and start taking action so that you can make actual progress on your goals. Alright, so the first thing you have to do is get rid of your expectations. This is where it all starts because it's probably what's holding you back the most. Chances are that your idea for your goal and your visions for what you want to achieve are so grand that they're intimidating and honestly pretty overwhelming. You end up putting so much pressure on yourself that you just keep planning and planning and planning to make sure everything is as perfect as possible, but you'll never reach your own standards. You'll keep on trying to perfect and optimize until eventually it just becomes impossible for you to even do anything, and you still won't be satisfied. I used to struggle with this a lot, and I wish I would have known back then how much having these expectations sets you back, because I actually ended up ruining a friendship as a result of my lack of follow-through. At the time, I had made this friend who was really artistic and into the same kinds of video games I was. I remember we'd leave class every day and be talking about stories and theories, and then eventually ideas that we had for our own video game. The cool thing was that he and I had really complementary skills, because I could handle all the writing, coding, and all the technical stuff, whereas he could handle all the art and the music and the sound design. We came up with all these ideas for what we wanted to do, and we were on the same page about everything. We literally could not have been a better duo, and then I dropped the ball. We were both pretty busy during the academic year, but we planned to meet up in the summer so that then we could finally start working on that game we talked so much about. We had everything planned out, and he was ready to finally start making progress. But I wasn't. I just didn't feel like any of my ideas were good enough, and if they were, then I didn't feel like I'd be able to execute them well enough. So he'd send me drafts of some of the art that he was working on, or samples of the soundtrack that he'd come up with, but I wouldn't have anything to send in return. He'd ask me how progress was going on my end, but I wouldn't respond. The pressure got to me, and eventually I just stopped trying, and eventually summer passed, and we haven't really talked much since then. Sometimes it's easy to focus too much on optimizing and trying to make things perfect, but that doesn't do anything for you. Being a perfectionist and not taking any action until you're absolutely certain that you can reach that level of perfection just means that you don't do anything. But the reality is that anything that you do at 80, 70, or even 50% that you can actually follow through on is way better than anything at 100% that you don't. Take my situation, for example. If I would have trashed all those expectations I had and just have done garbage work, then yeah, I might have made a shitty game, but it would have been a first step. I would have learned and therefore gotten better just by doing something, by taking action. And maybe the next summer we could have made something that would have actually been pretty decent. Maybe the one after that we could have made something pretty good, and maybe we'd still even be friends. The next thing that you need to do is take one step right now, regardless of what it is. When you spend so much time planning and planning without actually taking any action on anything, it's oftentimes just because it's kind of scary to take that first step. When you take that first step, everything suddenly becomes real. And you have to come to terms with the reality that, in real life, things might not actually be as perfect as they are in your head. But you've already gotten rid of those expectations, right? So that shouldn't be a problem. So what's holding you back? You're never more able to do what you want to do than you are in this moment right now. It's so easy to think that there will be some magical point in the future where you'll have more time, or you'll feel less tired, or you'll be more motivated, but none of that is true. The problems that you're facing right now, you're probably still going to be experiencing in the future, so you can't let them hold you back. And even if things do eventually get better, does that mean that you're only able to work on the things you want to work on when the conditions are perfect, and that the moment things get tough again, you'll quit? You can't be so attached to your situation. It couldn't matter less because there's always something that you can do. There's always another step you can take. It doesn't have to be perfect because there's no such thing as perfect. But once you take that first step, the next one isn't anywhere near as hard. It just gets easier and easier from there, and the fact that I'm talking to you right now is proof of that. This is all something that I've, for as long as I can remember, have always wanted to do, but that I've always been terrified of. I've started over 10 different YouTube channels over the last 10 years and none of them have any videos on them. The first video that I uploaded to this channel was called "This is the Hardest Part," and you know what? It was. Every single step I've taken since that first one has just been easier and easier. When you accustom yourself to actually doing, then you make action itself a habit. And then there's nothing that can stop you because you'll just keep putting things out there into the world regardless of what happens. Just do something, anything, and then you'll notice that everything else starts falling into place. Finally, you have to make use of deadlines to keep yourself on track. By this point, you've gotten rid of your expectations and finally taken that first step, both of which will help you to dig yourself out of being stuck in the planning phase. But if you want to make sure that you don't fall back in at some later point, then you have to make use of deadlines. Deadlines get a bad rep because of all the stress and negative associations that people have with them, but they're genuinely just really useful tools for keeping yourself consistent. I think back to when I was looking for a job a couple years ago after I had left a bad relationship and had basically hit rock bottom. I'd been unemployed for a bit since I quit my last software engineering job because of that relationship, and I was out of practice. If you're familiar with the tech industry, then you know that in order to be a software engineer, you have to go through a series of coding interviews that basically just feel like proctored exams. I won't go into the details of it, but they test you on all sorts of random technical subjects and have you solve these advanced complex problems in real time. So this means that if you want a job, you have to study. So that's what I did, but I had no structure behind it. I wasn't consistent. I'd study here and there, but if I didn't feel like it, I'd just leave it for tomorrow. I'd spend day after day coming up with a schedule for what I should study, but then I just wouldn't really do anything about it. There was no urgency, and so I didn't need to take any action. I could just wait it out. Months passed and I still had no job or even any interviews on the horizon, and I was really digging into my savings without having made any progress, so I knew that I needed to change my strategy. Rather than waiting until I finished studying to start scheduling interviews, I actually started scheduling interviews before I was ready for them, and that's how everything changed. All of a sudden, I had this sense of urgency because I knew that if I didn't finish studying by the end of the month, that I was going to blow it. I'd have my interview and then I'd make a complete fool of myself because I'd get everything wrong and then I'd lose my chance to ever work at that company. I gave myself a deadline, and that made it so that even if I wasn't perfect, even if I didn't know everything at 100%, I knew that I had to get through all my studying by a specific date. And I did. I went through all my interviews and I ended up with a couple different offers that I was able to negotiate. And I landed myself a pretty nice job that paid me more than I would have thought. Without giving myself that deadline, that urgency, none of that would have happened. I would have been stuck planning myself a study schedule for 6 months without ever actually just taking the plunge and doing it. At times, it's easy for that feeling of perfectionism to creep its way back in and cause you to stop making progress. But the accountability that comes from giving yourself deadlines for the things you need to do makes it so that sometimes you end up needing to sacrifice quality to just get things done by the time that you need, and that's a good thing. It's better to finish something that's okay than to never finish something that's perfect, and giving yourself specific dates by which you need to be finished with something, regardless of where it's at, really helps with that. And so that's how you can break out of the planning phase and actually get started with making progress on your goals. So to summarize, first you have to understand what the expectations you have that are holding you back are and get rid of them. Stop trying to optimize and stop trying to be perfect. Then you actually have to take that first step. Do something, anything, just get yourself to start making action itself into a habit. Finally, keep yourself consistent with that action by making use of deadlines so that you can hold yourself accountable and feel a sense of urgency to actually get things done. When you spend your life just stuck in that planning phase, it sucks. You wake up every day feeling like you're just wasting your life, and it feels like you're not progressing on any of the things that you actually want to do, but it doesn't have to be that way. I know because I've been there before too, and so if this is something you struggle with, then make sure you follow these 3 steps and check out this video where I talk about my experiences with those exact same feelings and give you 4 principles that you can use to overcome them. If you like this video, then let me know by giving me a thumbs up, and I have a lot more coming, so subscribe as well so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching.